Good afternoon. I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the April 18, 2022 edition of the Bible Delight in the Details, the end of the Passion Week edition. Now, we did not go live yesterday because of just a absolutely swamped schedule, as I'm sure you all had as well. But I taught a lengthy Sunday school lesson at church yesterday, and I wanted to bring to you just one little piece of that lesson that I think you will find encouraging and very exciting. We know that Jesus' ministry and his purpose for coming to the world is very keenly and accurately reflected in all of the events of Holy Week, and especially in those things that have to do specifically with the Passover lamb. Paul says in 1 Corinthians that he is our Passover lamb. But Paul also says in that same letter to the Corinthians that he is our first fruits. Now, the Passover, when it ended, there was the very next day, the beginning of a 7-day feast. You can read all about the 7 ordained feasts of the Lord in Leviticus chapter 23. The next feast was actually 7 days, and it was called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And this is when there'd been a lot of work trying to cleanse your home of anything that was leaven, because leaven represented sin. And so this was an opportunity to try to live a better life, a sinless or at least less sinful life. Now, Jesus, of course, was sinless. And this is why on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which would have been what we call Holy Saturday, which was also a Sabbath at the time, Jesus' body in the grave knew no corruption, because sin causes corruption of the flesh and corruption of the spirit. And his body did not rot in any way on Saturday. And then on Sunday, while it is still the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 6 more days, there was also another feast known as the Feast of First Fruits. The barley crop was always the first crop of the spring harvest to come up. And so on this day at 9 o'clock, as the beginning of the offertory day was occurring at the temple, the high priest would take the first of the barley crop. This is something that obviously had come up alive out of the ground, out of the dead ground, and he would wave it before the Lord. This is the exact wording of Leviticus, that the first fruit was to be waved before the Lord, that you might be accepted and found acceptable. If you've ever wondered why in the Gospels we are told that Jesus said to Mary, "Stop clinging to me," in the garden, he wasn't upset that she had touched him. The other women had touched him too, touched his feet. But he told Mary to stop clinging to him. And specifically why? He said, "Because I have not yet ascended to my Father." When you understand that Jesus had something left to do, he needed to get up to heaven by that 9 o'clock time so that he could be presented. Him as the high priest could present the first fruit, him having been resurrected, had to present himself to the Lord. Because you see, this presentation was God assuring that there would be more harvest to follow. And so we know that because Jesus was resurrected, our first fruit, the rest of us who will make the next harvest will also be resurrected. And so it was a glorious day, but Jesus had to get on with getting up there and making it so that the next group, the next crop, which is us, would be found acceptable. Now, after he did that, he had plenty of time for people. We know he appeared to two disciples on the road to Emmaus. He found Peter and spoke with him, and then at the end of the day, he walked right through a wall and spoke to many of the disciples and others gathered in the upper room. I think it is important here on the Monday after Holy Week that we realize that there's no need for the excitement and the enthusiasm of Easter to be draining away from us. We are still in the feast of unleavened bread, which is not possible for us to experience, that is, a lack of sin, unless Jesus empowers that. And while we know that we will never be completely sinless, we will never be absolutely conformed to the image of Christ until our own glorification, when we die and are taken into heaven, yet we should be being transformed and conformed to the image and likeness of God's Son. That's indeed why we're not just taken on into heaven as soon as we are believers. There is a process, and it has to do, frankly, with becoming less like the world, including less sinful, and more like Christ, who, of course, is sinless. And so, my friends, the Feast of Unleavened Bread continues, not under our own power, but under His, our first fruit. So let the feast forever continue. I'm J. Lenora Bressler. Visit me on the next edition of The Bible, Delight in the Details, and have a wonderful week. Because when you stop to think about it, when you know the Lord, every week is a holy week. Bye-bye now.